Hello, everyone. I really apologize you can't see me. I don't know how to make Microsoft Streams show me. And after so much time, I'm just going to get on with it. So, this is Botswana Blood Commons, visualizing blood services as a public commons partnership. I am one of the three co-authors. My name is Justin Sachs. I'm from Lancaster University. And there are two other co-authors, Rosendy Galabo at Lancaster University and Badziili and Nthubu at Botswana International University of Science and Technology. And as part of my acknowledgement, rather appropriately, I'm speaking to you as the white person, man from the global north in these, as you can see on the slide. But I'm also less visibly the one queer person of our group. And I think I like to draw on that experience as a queer person and a member of allyship programs at my own university as part of thinking about how we decenter ourselves and support others, and also at the same time think about how it doesn't work. For me, this paper presents an important question about how to be an ally. I do have knowledge and experience as we're sharing, but I also know that I want this knowledge and experience to center the work and the struggles of other people. So I think I acknowledge that I am constantly trying to figure out what the boundary is between genuine and humble allyship and ego. So without further ado, the research question here is, what role can the commons play in improving citizen trust in healthcare services? And leading to the title of the paper, specifically, we're looking at what role can the commons play in improving citizen trust in blood donation to address chronic blood shortages in Botswana. And in response to this question, we've adapted several frameworks to support the visualization of a different governance system in Botswana based on partnership between the parliamentary republican system and the indigenous governance system known as kgotla. So a word about blood supply in Botswana. There have been chronic shortages for years, and the country suffered an acute crisis in 2020, as many countries did. So workshops led by Dr. Nthubu identified the following barriers to trust in blood services. So first and foremost was a lack of trust in blood use. So what happens to blood after it's donated? Second were negative perceptions, often culturally and religiously tied around donating blood. Third was bad hospital experiences, such as relatives waiting days to receive blood in hospital. And this also led to a lack of incentive, since this didn't feel like a goodwill process. Where was the incentive in this process? So if we start this design process, assuming these concerns are valid, which we should, what is needed here is not more information campaigns or community ambassadors, which are all designed to move people from one position to another. What is needed here instead is a different approach to designing the management of blood donation, as well as the rest of what we call blood services in this paper, which includes donation, as well as transfusion and logistics. And so what we're looking at in this paper is how can this parliamentary republican governance cosmology around how blood donation works, and that dominates the design of blood services, how can that interact with and privilege the indigenous kgotla cosmology to design this shared governance system for blood services? So first, the kgotla, what are they? So Botswana has an intact and recognized indigenous governance system called kgotla. Kgotla is the name for both the customary governance system in these villages, and it's also the physical space where meetings take place, which you can see in these photos. So the kgotla is both a forum for discussing the developmental agenda of the village, and it's also the justice system used for resolving community conflicts. Communities, common scholars, dating back to at least the 1990s, have recognized kgotla as a type of commons. Though interestingly, this research tends to focus on how kgotla can manage so-called natural resource systems like grazing land and river deltas. There's not any known literature, in the commons literature at least, that extends this kgotla governance to social policy areas like blood services. Now, importantly for this paper, while a single kgotla is a commons, to address blood services at a national level means looking at how these many kgotla interact. So we need to look at commons as an ecosystem, or commons ecosystems. So we looked at two frameworks to do this. So the first is this Jigsaw framework, which we're drawing on as a way to map ecosystems. And we chose this framework because it has previously been developed and applied within Botswana around ecosystem development, specifically craft manufacturing ecosystems. And what we'll focus on in this presentation is the position generator method used to identify stakeholder positions and measure connection strength between stakeholders. So on the left, we have this template visualization, and on the right, we have a participant who's using the visualization in a workshop. And there are a few features of this visualization. The first are segments. So it's not just, there are some you can see kind of divided like an orange. And the idea there is that the participant can categorize their contacts in their ecosystem using the areas they decide for themselves, maybe inputs or advertising. And then these concentric circles allow the participant to map their contacts. And the stronger the contact is, the closer to the center, because the center of the circle is the person doing the visualization. And finally, what's really interesting is when the participant will then compare their visualization with the visualizations made by others in the community, particularly from other positions. And that's where we see how these worldviews align and diverge. The challenge, though, in this paper, or that we pose in this paper, is that the kgotla aren't currently imagined as part of this blood services ecosystem at all. So in order to get them in there, we need to first revisualize or politicize this visualization tool to prompt consideration of a blood services ecosystem where kgotla fit. To do that, we drew on the public commons partnership framework. There aren't that many frameworks for commons ecosystems, and we selected this one as kind of the most relevant and articulate for our context. On the left is the original version, and on the right is our simple adaptation. And there are kind of 4 features of the framework. The first is the common association. So there's some kind of federation of these commons, and in our version, we call that the kgotla association. Next is the local authority, so that's the government organization involved, and in our example, that's the NBTS, which is the National Blood Transfusion Services. Then these come together to form a joint enterprise, and enterprise may not be the right word, but some kind of joint initiative, and in ours we call that the blood service. And finally, there's this box on top that isn't labeled, and which we later call other stakeholders, and so that kind of comes in from the top, and those are people who aren't either one, but are important to this partnership. Next step I wanted to do was to map, to translate this model into the visualization tool already being used in the Jigsaw framework. And so what happens is that joint initiative, the blood services, becomes the center of the visualization, just like the participant would be in the workshop. And then we have these 2 worldviews that have to find a way to interact with each other. So we have the kgotla association and we have the NBTS. And then what we've done is we've turned this last segment, the other stakeholders, that box from the top, into the third segment, which is probably some combination of stakeholders identified by both the kgotla association and the NBTS. Lastly, we have this thing called choice levels. And so in the Jigsaw visualization, the participants use the strength of the relationship as an indicator in mapping the contacts. But we thought this might be a way to actually incorporate an important feature of commons literature, which is called choice levels. And what these choice levels describe are the roles people play in different types or levels of decision-making. So it's nested decision-making. And there are 3 choice levels: constitutional, collective, and operational. And in this model for the kgotla association, we can kind of work from the inside out very quickly. So let's say there's a blood donation site in the village. Only certain people need to be involved in decision-making around that. So they're involved in the operations of that donation site. And you may have examples of your own community where only a small number of people are involved in a specific event that might be part of a wider committee. And so this small group is part of a larger group, which is the collective choice level. And that group might actually involve maybe others involved in transfusion or SMS messaging, and maybe they need to make some collective decisions across these groups together. And so that's the collective choice level. And then we move up to the next level, the constitutional choice, and that's everyone who constitutes the commons. So we've combined everyone from these other 2 levels together. But just like with elections, not everyone has to be involved in every decision and all the way down to donation sites, right? There may be only certain decisions where everyone has to get involved. And so this kind of nested governance would also exist for the NBTS, the other segment. The outermost ring I introduced is called external, and that is a way for identifying who might be part of this commons, but not as constitutional members. So maybe the kgotla association relies on private drivers at donation sites, and these people need to be involved in decision-making, but they aren't necessarily part of the kgotla association. So that was an attempt to kind of give some structure there. And then finally, this last visualization from the paper is just trying to kind of put this all together. And so we have a process where the kgotla association and the NBTS separately go through a process of categorizing and mapping these contacts. And then we look to combine those together here by combining what they do for themselves and then also the other stakeholders they identify. And then there's a process that will be very interesting about how to find a way of reconciling and integrating these different worldviews to create a public commons partnership. And so that is what we're doing next. And here are our contact details. That is the end of the presentation. We welcome your ideas and collaboration and look forward to speaking.